President, I just wanted to say a few words this afternoon on some of the issues that the Senate is dealing with. Last week, I believe that I was the first member of the Senate to suggest very strongly that Michael Mukasey should not become the next Attorney General, and I'm very pleased that in the last week more and more of my colleagues are coming to that same conclusion. Mr. President, the Attorney General of the United States must be a defender of our constitutional rights, because President Bush thinks he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. We need an Attorney General who can explain to the President what the Constitution of this country is all about. We need an Attorney General who does not believe that the President has unlimited power. We need an Attorney General who will tell President Bush that he is not above the law. We need an Attorney General who clearly understands the separation of powers inherent in our Constitution. Regretfully, I have concluded that Michael Mukasey would not be that kind of Attorney General. I am gratified that more and more of my colleagues are coming to that same conclusion. Let me be very clear. It goes without saying that the United States government must do everything that it can to protect the American people from the very, very dangerous threats of international terrorism. But we can do that in ways that are effective and that are consistent with the Constitution of our country and the civil liberties that it guarantees. We do not have to give up our basic freedoms in the name of fighting terrorism. The Bush administration and the lawyers who have enabled it for the past 7 years cannot be bothered, it appears, with such technical legal niceties as the Bill of Rights. This administration thinks that it can eavesdrop on telephone conversations without warrants, suspend due process for people classified as quote-unquote enemy combatants, and thumb its nose when Congress exercises its oversight responsibility. That is why I called on Alberto Gonzales to resign. I had hoped that the confirmation process for a new Attorney General would give the President and the Senate an important opportunity to refocus on the core American principles embodied in our Constitution. Unfortunately, it appears that Judge Mukasey just doesn't get it. At his two-day confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee, he suggested that eavesdropping without warrants and using quote-unquote enhanced interrogation techniques for terrorism suspects might be constitutional, even if they exceeded what the law technically allowed. Mr. Mukasey said that Congress might not have the power to stop the President from conducting some surveillance without warrants. He even incredibly claimed to be unfamiliar with the technique known as waterboarding. Mr. President, if Judge Mukasey cannot say plainly that the President must obey a valid statute, he ought not to be the nation's next Attorney General, wrote Jed Rubenfeld, a professor of constitutional law at Yale Law School, who had appeared before Judge Mukasey as a prosecutor. And he has got that right. It has become an American aphorism that ours is a government of laws, not men. We need an Attorney General who understands that, so unfortunately, that he can explain it to a President who does not. Mr. President, I would like permission to enter into the record on another subject, an article that appeared in the LA Times today.
Without objection.
Mr. President, what that article talks about is the fact that every day our main ally in Iraq, the United Kingdom, is withdrawing more and more of its troops. And the first paragraph of the article in the LA Times today states, and I quote, saying that Iraqi forces are now capable of dealing with the violence that persists in the South, Britain's defense secretary said Wednesday that his government intended to hand over security for the area by mid-December. And later on in the article it says, and I quote, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown announced last month that his government, the main U.S. foreign partner in Iraq, would pull out half its remaining troops by June, leaving 2,500 soldiers stationed outside Basra, end of quote. In other words, Mr. President, it is the United States of America, more or less alone, that is continuing this war in Iraq. We have some 140,000 soldiers in Iraq. There are tens and tens of thousands of private contractors in Iraq. And it seems to me the time is long overdue for us to learn from our allies of the United Kingdom that we have got to begin bringing home our troops as they are as soon as we possibly can. Senator Menendez made the case, I thought very impressively, about what this war is costing us in terms of human life, what it is costing us in terms of the tens of thousands of soldiers who are going to return back home here with traumatic brain injury, with post-traumatic stress disorder, without arms and without legs. This war has cost the Iraqi people almost beyond comprehension. No one knows exactly how many hundreds of thousands of Iraqi men, women, and children are dead, but there are estimates that go way up to close to 1 million. There are 2 million Iraqis who have been forced to flee their own country, and there are 2 million who have been displaced internally, have had to leave their homes because of ethnic cleansing and because of the violence that existed in their neighborhoods. This war has resulted tragically in the standing of the United States of America being diminished all over the world. Some of us can remember years back when a president of the United States would go to Europe, would go abroad, and hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, would be lining streets with American flags, looking up to America and saying, America, you are the kind of country that we want to be. But now, when this president goes abroad, there are thousands and thousands of people who are coming out, but invariably they are demonstrating against the United States. And what poll after poll shows, to our great loss, to our capability in fighting international terrorism, that we have lost the moral high ground, that our standing throughout the world is significantly diminished. And certainly one of the challenges that we face as a Senate is to restore the confidence that the entire world used to have in the United States and restore that once again so that when our kids go visiting Europe and somebody says to them, what country do you come from? They don't have to say they come from Canada. They can say proudly they come from the United States of America, a country that once again, we hope, will be respected throughout the entire world. So, Mr. President, I would hope very much that we will follow the lead of our friends in the United Kingdom, who are now down to 2,500 troops. I suspect that in the not-too-distant future, those troops will probably be withdrawn. We should be bringing our troops home as soon as we possibly can. And the last point that I want to make, Mr. President, is we think fairly soon, as I understand it, the agricultural bill will come to the floor of the Senate. And in that bill, I think under Senator Harkin's leadership, there have been some very positive changes being made. But I think because of lack of funding, that bill does not go anywhere near as far as it should in addressing some of the very serious problems we face in our country in terms of nutrition and in terms of hunger. Mr. President, the United States of America, at the same time as we are spending $10 billion a month on the war in Iraq, has the dubious distinction of having by far the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, with almost 1/5, almost 1 out of 5 kids in this country living in poverty. Compare that to Scandinavia, where it's maybe 3%, 4%. And the rate of poverty in America is growing. Last year, Mr. President, as you may recall, the United States Department of Agriculture, in the midst of this increase in poverty in our country, reported that 12% of Americans, 35 million people, could not put food on their table at least part of the year. 35 million of our fellow Americans could not put food on the table for at least part of the year. Mr. President, that is not what should be happening in our country. And when the Senate deals with the agricultural bill, I will be offering an amendment which will ask for a commitment from the United States Senate that says that at a time when the wealthiest people are becoming wealthier, when the poorest are becoming poorer, when hunger in America is increasing, that this Senate, this Congress, make a moral commitment to abolish hunger in this country in the next 5 years. That is really not asking too much for our country to be doing. So, Mr. President, we have got to fundamentally change the priorities of our nation. When billionaires want tax breaks, we have money for them. We have money for war. But when children go hungry, I guess there's just no money available. So I look forward to working with my colleagues to change the priorities of this Senate so that we start paying attention to the vast majority of our people rather than just the few and the wealthy who have so much power. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield back.